and sometimes a project can not quite work. Like I think one of the cool things about having now decades of experience as a writer, it's so much more fun than when I was younger, because when I was younger, the gap between what I wanted to say and what I could say with my skill set was bigger than it is now. So now when I want to say something, I have the toolkit and the experience to be able to say it pretty close to how I want it to come out. And there's no way to fast forward that. That's purely experience.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Nova Podcast. Today, we have an extraordinary guest, a true force in children's entertainment and digital media. Joining us today, Sandra Payne, an award-winning director, writer, producer, and beloved children's author. Sandra has shaped stories for all ages, from the lovable PBS classic Wishbone to the imaginative worlds of Princess Dormy and Disney's Puppy Dog Pal. But that's not all. She's also has accomplished creator in digital media and owner of SP Ride Productions. Sandra, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And what a lovely introduction. I'm so impressed with myself.
Of course. So Sandra, let's start at the beginning, please. You had an impressive journey, career from Wishbone to Disney and beyond. Where
Yes.
Where did your love for storytelling begin? And what drew you to this world of the children specifically?
Okay, so the fun thing is that when I was 9 years old, I knew I wanted to write for children. And so the fact that I get to do that for my life is the most exciting thing on the planet. And so I always think when I hear people like they don't know what they want to do, trust me, I went through that whole phase in my 20s where I don't know what I want to do. And then I finally was like, well, I'm going to do what I wanted to do when I was 9 and maximum happiness. So I would say a lot of times I think if there's someone who's like, I don't know what I want to do. Well, what did you want to do when you were little? Like what lights you up inside? Look at that and then design your life around that track. So the reason I think that I wanted to write for children was because my dad is a really, really good storyteller. And so when we were little, we would go and listen to him tell us stories and he would make them up on the fly. And so I remember getting our typewriter out. I know that's technology that no one knows what that is, but it's the old school way of like having a computer with a piece of paper and like a keyboard. And so I started writing those stories down when I was 9. And then I went off track for quite a while and thought I was a bookkeeper when I was in high school. I got a job working. I got a job at a photography studio, like a photography store. And while I was there, I learned how to deal with the cash registers and stuff. And then I moved down into the bookkeeping department, which was in the basement. And I did that for 4.5 years. So then I thought I'm going to be an accountant. Well, I don't know, you've known me for 1 to 2 minutes, but you're probably like, she doesn't seem like the accountant type. And you would be right. I don't know what went through my mind, why I would pursue that, but I did. I went to college and I started accounting classes. I despised them. And then I had told everyone that's what I was going to be. So then I was like, oh, I'm just going to keep doing it, even though I hate it. And then I finally changed my major. And I got 2 degrees, one in marketing, one in management. Not terrible things to have, but not exactly what lit me up. And then my thought process is oh, I'm going to go to law school. I'm going to be a lawyer. And that's sort of word adjacent. So I was like, yeah, word adjacent. We're good. Wow. But my husband and I were moving, so I couldn't apply for law school until a year later because you can't apply to law school. You have to start in the fall. And so I couldn't find a job. We were moving to San Antonio in Texas. I couldn't find a job. So I thought, well, I'll get a job at a law firm being just like a secretary, legal secretary, because that job I could get. Even though I had 2 degrees from college, no one would hire me. And so I got the job at the law firm. I was there for approximately 5 minutes. And I was like, wow, I hate this. And so I did that for 2 years. And
Wow.
great thing about it was by the time I finished, I could type like the wind. So when I got the job, I typed 90 words a minute. When I finished the job, I typed 110 words a minute. And that's served me so well as a writer, because being able to channel like all your creativity, and it just comes out through your fingers, and you're so happy because you can type as fast as you think. So it's a good skill to have. But I'm so glad I'm not an attorney, because that wasn't for me. And when we were in San Antonio, we ended up moving up to Dallas. And at that time I was 29, and I was like, I need to stop messing around, because that whole 20s, I was like, what am I supposed to do with my life? Like, my 9-year-old self knew more than my 29-year-old self. And I didn't have any confidence about being a writer. I just was nervous about, like, can I write? I don't know. Should I? So I decided, well, okay, I will get a job. I will go back to school and get a master's degree in English. And that is what I did. And I can literally tell you, you don't need to do that. But I did. I had to do it, because it was my way of getting myself past over the threshold of confidence into a place where I could actually say to myself, I am a writer. Now, getting a master's in English wasn't the thing that gave me confidence necessarily, but the writing that I did in school, what happened is that I randomly took a class in screenwriting. And then I was like, oh, what is this magical, fun thing that you can do, which is to write for television or movies? And it had never occurred to me, never, that is a thing. And then once I started doing it, I was like, this is everything that I love about writing distilled into this one track. Because it's like, to me, it's poetry plus journalism. You have to be poetic in the words that you use, very spare, very, very visual, but informational in the journalism side. You're giving just the facts in a poetic way. That's screenwriting. And I loved it. I loved it from the first moment I did it. And there's the nutshell of my advice to people. It's like, hey, follow your heart. If your heart lights up at something, that's a huge sign that that's what you should be doing with your life. And if your heart is sad, don't do it. Don't do it. Listen to your gut. And when your gut is like, oh, this is icky, don't do that. Like, you're here on the planet once. You get one shot at this. Make sure your life fuels your spirit.
That's true. And I have to tell you, I am 29 and I still don't know what to do, Sandra. So I think I am in that place still. But I want to ask you, you wrote Barney and Friends, which Victor Andres and I, we were seeing it. We loved it when we were kids.
That's so nice.
What's unique about writing for animated shows? What's besides the passion and that you feel comfortable in that place? Why, especially for these young audiences, so unique about it to write?
I think that the best thing about writing for animation is that whatever you can imagine can happen. Like, nowadays with regular, like live action things, that's kind of true as well, because there's so much CGI and so many things you can do to make whatever story you think of happen. But in animation, it's like 10 times that. Like, if you want to have a character fly to the moon on a little rocket, you can do that. And that's a lot harder with CGI and a lot less believable. But with animation, hey, no problem. You can totally have your character do that. And I think the wide open space of creativity with animation is what I love about it.
Beautiful. That's so true. I don't know, Vitandra, if you have a question for Sandra, because I have so many questions for Sandra that I really want to get to, but I want you to give it the word as well.
Yeah. While you were talking, and I don't know if Stephanie told you, but there was a point in my life that I was writing some books. I wrote one that I haven't published it yet. The second one, I'm still working on it. I have been. It will be an excuse if I say I was way too busy, because we're never way too busy.
You're right. You're right about that.
Sometimes we left the project midway, but I'm really eager to ask, with all the projects that you have worked, the TV shows, maybe some movies or the books, which one was your favorite? The one that you said, I got in love with this project, and why?
It's my book that I did. That's a post-apocalyptic sci-fi dystopian thriller. I've had it living inside of me for like 2 decades, 20 years. It lived inside of me. So don't worry about timelines. You guys are young. You're good. You can just know that it's always like, we always want the thing that we want sooner than it can happen. And just patience is a virtue. Like, just be patient with yourself and keep working at it. Because the one winning tactic about being an artist is perseverance. Like, you win if you don't quit. Never quit. Like, and sometimes a project can not quite work. Like, I think one of the cool things about having now decades of experience as a writer, it's so much more fun than when I was younger. Because when I was younger, the gap between what I wanted to say and what I could say with my skill set was bigger than it is now. So now when I want to say something, I have the toolkit and the experience to be able to say it pretty close to how I want it to come out. And there's no way to fast forward that. That's purely experience. And obviously there's people who are way younger than me, who are wildly successful. Good for them. And I'm happy for them. But I'm here to tell you, just plodding forward steadily will eventually win the day. And you can get there. And I had tried to write that book several times, and it never, ever was coming out the way I wanted it. And trust me, the first 10 pages of that book, I've probably written that, I don't know, 100 times. But as I got further along into the book, then it just really started to flow. And it was just so hard to get those first 10 pages right, because it was the setup for the story. It was everything. It was the characters. All the stuff was getting introduced. And so, like, at first, when I was inexperienced, I couldn't wrestle that to the ground very well. When I finally had enough experience in the background to make that come out the way I wanted to, then it was so exciting. And then it made the rest of writing that book really fun. So that book is actually, I call it a book. It's 2,200 pages long. So it's really like 4 to 5 books. Because that's a nonsense amount. No one's going to buy a 2,200 page book. Like War and Peace is like 1,200 pages, and everyone's like, And so mine's like double War and Peace. You're like, nope, nobody wants that. So, but they could, do 700 page multiple books and get up to a 4-book series. And sadly, it's not done. There's still more to write. I'm like, it's done, but it's not done. Everyone who finished reading it is like, well, where's the rest? I'm like, oh my God. So it's like I don't know how many page thing, but all I would say to you is my giant piece of advice about, like, I love that I have written that because it was a lot of work. And it feels so good to have that out in the world. And the bad news is no one's read it. Like, it's maybe 100 people have read it. It doesn't matter in this, it matters, like, financially it matters, but it doesn't matter that no one's read it, because what I really care about is that I did it. Like, that's what I care about. So I think that the fun thing about being a writer, and the most important thing about being a writer, is having written. Like, you got to finish stuff. You got to get stuff across the finish line. And struggling with doing the writing is not uncommon. That's kind of how it is. And you just make sure you never give up. You put, this is what I tell people about that exact thing, is like, I have a couple buckets in my head, and you want to make sure that the writing is in the non-negotiable bucket, because you don't want to tell yourself that you need to be motivated to write or inspired to write. None of that is true. It's not true. You can write right now. I could give you a pen and a piece of paper and go, you write me 2 sentences on some kind of idea that you have, and you would be able to do it. Right. You wouldn't need to wait to be inspired to have that happen. So you can't trick yourself into thinking that there's some perfect moment in time that you'll feel like everything has coalesced and now I can write this perfect thing. It never happens that way. You're not going to be able to do it that way. What will win is just plodding forward, making sure that you put words on the page every day. If you write every day, you make progress. You will be so surprised at how much you can get done. I don't make rules on how much I write. I can just make sure I if I just make a sentence, then I'm happy. And because all I need is to remind my brain that we don't have a choice in this. We are doing it. We're doing it. And I'm going to wrestle myself to the ground and make sure it happens. That's because it is non-negotiable.